Russian President Vladimir Putin holds his annual end-of-the-year news conference to brief regional, national and international journalists on his government's domestic and foreign policy. He is also expected to give an update on the country's efforts in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's get the very latest now and bring in our correspondent in Moscow, Stuart Smith. Stuart, very good morning to you. What can we expect from today's briefing?
Well, it's always a multi-hour affair, with last year's going on for around 4 hours, so a lot to cover, and it takes everything from the domestic to the international. This year is a bit different because President Putin will be calling in from his residence just outside of Moscow. That's a COVID-19 precaution. He's been basing himself there for much of the past year, and indeed, journalists will have a chance to ask him questions, but also this is about an opportunity for President Putin to try and big up the successes of the Russian Federation this year. So the things he will want to talk about are things like the success of the Russian vaccine manufacturing operation with the Sputnik V Russian vaccine, the first in the world to be registered. Now, there were some questions about whether that was registered too early, but indeed it was the first registered in the world, and it's now being rolled out across Russia, one of the first countries to start mass vaccination. As well as Sputnik V, Russia has two other vaccines being tested. So a successful year in terms of vaccine production for Russia. Other things, they've managed to change to a social learning system, an online social distanced education system for primary school students. He wants to talk about the success of that. And there's also the economy. There are always things good he can say about the economy, even in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. But undoubtedly, there'll be things he would rather not talk about, such as the level of poverty increasing in Russia, the fact that pensions are being cut and wages have flatlined. There'll be other things he wants to talk about as well. He would rather not talk about. We'll see if any journalists ask him, such as the poisoning of Alexei Navalny, the anti-corruption activist, the opposition politician, and possibly also an increase in military spending.
I just want to touch a bit more on Russia's Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine. Stuart, what are we learning about it? How efficacious is it? What are we learning from the analysis of the data?
Yeah, so part of the problem with this is not all of the data from the phase 3 trial has actually been released, and part of that is what leads to a certain level of skepticism amongst the public and amongst doctors about whether this vaccine is safe. The manufacturers say it's 91% effective and no major side effects have been seen in any of the trials, but you have to take their word for it because the phase 3 trial data has only preliminary been released as the trial is ongoing, and again, you have to make sure that you trust the Russian scientists and the results which have been coming out. Scientists around the world questioned the veracity of the phase 1 and phase 2 data, so you can't take anything necessarily at face value, but the rollout has begun regardless, even though phase 3 trials haven't been completed, and around over 150,000 people so far have received that vaccine.
Stuart, US politics dominating world headlines. Many world leaders moved quickly to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden. President Putin seemingly held back a bit. He has now congratulated Biden. What's the talk on the ground? What were the reasons for the seeming delay?
Yeah, so President Putin has been quite diplomatic throughout the whole of the election, before the election and afterwards, saying that the Russian people will work with whoever the United States citizens decide to elect. In this case, Joe Biden was the winner, and indeed, he did wait for a long time, much later than other world leaders, including China, before congratulating Joe Biden. President Putin was consistent, though. His spokesperson said he did not want to praise any world leader, any US leader, for winning the election until the Electoral College vote had gone through, until all these disputes had been worked their way through the courts and there was a final decision. He then did come out and congratulate Biden on his win and says he's looking forward to mutual cooperation.
Let's talk a bit about that, Stuart. Russian-American cooperation. What would it look like under a Biden-Harris administration? We know that President Putin had one would say, relatively good relationship with US President Donald Trump. What about sanctions? Does this change anything?
Yeah, it does. So unusually for a US president coming in, Putin already knows Joe Biden very well from his time as when Biden was vice president. And unfortunately, perhaps for the start of a new set of relations for the next 4 years, Joe Biden was the one who was instrumental in creating sanctions against Russian officials after what happened in Ukraine and with the invasion of Crimea. And so not a good starting point. Joe Biden has also called Russia an opposition during the election, so things are very frosty at the moment. Now, Russia says it wants to work with Putin, but even just last week there was a cyber attack against US government departments, which is being attributed by US officials to a state actor, and the hint is it was Russia behind this cyber attack. Putin has also this year been very excited to announce the development of a hypersonic missile, which is something that is intercontinental and is very difficult to stop. So both in the cyber realm and the physical realm, it seems like Putin isn't changing the way he's willing to deal in global negotiations, although the talk coming from the Kremlin is that he does want to work with the US.
Stuart Smith, live for us in Moscow. Thank you, sir.